Hi, Aaron. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you on here. I know you have a lot of awesome things going on. We also have some mutual friends, and they kind of introduced me to you, and you have amazing things that I want to share on my podcast. So I drug you on here today from over the big ocean there.
Yeah, if you can't tell, the Australian accent probably comes through loud and clear.
I love it. I think it sounds great.
Awesome. I'm always the guy with the accent. Like, oh, who's that guy with the accent? I was like, just say something funny, It's like, so no,
That's
it's great. And
awesome.
shout out to Frida and John as well. Thanks for the mutual friend respect. I love it.
I love that. It's so great. I've developed a bunch of really wonderful friends through my podcast, and I randomly met them on social media and stuff, and now we all communicate via text message, and it's kind of hilarious because I'm like, okay, well, there is one thing that social media is good for, right? And that's connecting like-minded individuals.
Right, exactly right. And I think doing a podcast is a great way to do that as well. Just like meeting face to face is, even if it's via video, I mean, like everyone's doing that now with COVID, but it's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. So before we get going too crazy here, you want a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what your journey has looked like?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Aaron, and I started doing lots of keto recipes. So I'm probably most well known for keto bread or keto chocolate chip cookies or keto cheesecake and those types of really delicious things in the keto world that most people tend to gravitate towards when they first start keto, right? And so I did a lot of that, and I still do a lot of that. I've got a sweet cheese cookbook out. I've got a meal prep cookbook out, and doing those really taught me a lot of what people struggle with when it comes to dealing with the ketogenic diet. So I went and did some study, and then I came back, and now I help clients lose weight using the ketogenic diet. So a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, I'm trying the ketogenic diet, and there's lots of information on the internet, which is awesome, but lots of conflicting stuff too. And so you get clients that just want to lose weight, and they're not sure if they're doing all the right things and if they're doing anything at all, and how they sort of go through that. So now I work with clients, taking them through that process and really just simplifying not only keto, but all of the stress that's happening in their life too. I think that that's a major factor for a lot of people. And so just getting people to have the right mindset is the main issue there. So that's what I do. And I think I've got lots of recipes and stuff on my website, but that's pretty much the crux of what I do.
That's awesome. I love that. So you're coaching people, you're helping them make all these changes. And then you've also got these cookbooks going on. So you're a busy guy.
Right. Yeah. And lots of recipes going around the house, so
That's
or
awesome.
lots of recipes going to other people too. So that's always, if you want to become friends with me, you're going to have to start accepting keto desserts as payment.
Hey, you know what? I'm not complaining about that at all. I'm like, I've been cooking since I was a very small child. I remember my mom was a long haul truck driver, and my dad was working all the time. So we were pretty much left by ourselves on our ranch all the time when I was very small, probably like first, second grade. So I was quite young. Um, I remember getting out one of my mom's Betty Crocker cookbooks when I was probably in the third grade, and I was going to make donuts in that thing. And I
Yeah.
remember getting them out and doing all this stuff and trying to deep fry them in a cast iron pan. It did not work, and it was a huge mess. And I remember my dad came home and he was mad at me because of the mess that I made. But that's been pretty much setting the standard for my whole life, right? I've been a huge cooking person, and that's kind of what got me into this and nutrition and all these things. So you and I are kind of in the same camp when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, and it's so awesome, like I was someone who never really learned how to cook when I was younger. And so I sort of came from it with a bit of a different angle where I was like, okay, I want to have good nutrition. How on earth do I make food that actually tastes good without it tasting like horrible garbage, right? And so I learned how to cook sort of in a bit of a different way. Like I started off being a butcher, and I wasn't a qualified butcher. I worked at a butcher store, but doing lots of work with them. And then I never really had to cook the meat. I would always just send them off and say, yeah, put it in the oven at 180 or 350 an hour and it'll be good. I assumed, right? And so cooking sort of came at a later point, but I'm glad it did, because it taught me a lot about pairing flavors, and sort of when you don't go down that traditional route of cooking, you sort of understand the gripes that people have when they say, look, I'm not a very good cook and I don't know how to put things together. Like, how do I follow the ketogenic diet if I'm not a very good cook? And I'm like, mate, been there, done that. I'll show you. So it kind of helps, but also now being at the point where I can put flavors together, that's super helpful. And I've got lots of like tips and tactics for people if we want to go down that route too.
I love that. So what got you, first of all, interested in the keto diet in particular? And then I'm assuming that along with that interest came all of these amazing creations that you have, right?
Yeah, so I was working as a software developer at the time. Crazy, like I've been a musician and a software developer, now I'm in nutrition, and it sort of teaches you all of these things about just being creative. And cooking was sort of like the next step on that. So for me, the ketogenic diet I became very interested in it. I was an endurance athlete at the time, working towards a massive one-day event down in Melbourne. It's called Three Peaks, and it's not a race, but it's like a 250 kilometer, 150 mile, like up three massive mountains. And so I was training for that. And I thought, I was sick of bonking. I was sick of getting to that glycogen depleted state where you run out of fuel, you can't pedal anymore, you just can't do it. And I was like, well, maybe the ketogenic diet might be an appropriate solution for that. And I started it. I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast where he talked to Dr. Dominic D'Agostino years and years and years ago. And I was like, I'm just going to try. And I failed miserably. And 4 weeks later, I was like back to the bananas and stuff. And I just did it wrong, and I wasn't getting enough electrolytes. As an athlete, you need so much nutrition that just really isn't highlighted when you go low carb. And so I didn't give myself enough time to adapt, and my performance dropped and all these things. And so I went back and I did some research and sort of started implementing it in a better way. But through that, I wanted to help the people around me, because I was working as a developer, lots of people sitting down for 8-9 hours at a time. The people in the office had gained more weight than they probably would have wanted to. And so I said to them, I was like, look, can I just I want to help you out. Like, I'll make you a meal plan of the stuff that I've been doing, and hopefully that might work for you. And at the time, I had another friend who was trying to start an online business, and we were together saying, like, we just need to make somehow $100 online. And that to me just sounded ludicrous. I was like, $100? Like, yeah, I work as a software developer and I get paid such and such per hour, but like $100 online, you got to be kidding me. So I was charging like $10 for these meal plans to the 10 of my friends, right? And that's $100. And I was like, that's awesome. But I learned along the way that it's a lot of work, and it's not just about the meal plan. It's also about the adherence to that and how to like figure that out for the person. But taking that through, then I started creating recipes, and then I saw that, making a food blog can potentially be a business online. And I thought, well, I've been doing this for a long time, like may as well just put my recipes on a website and see how I go. And being a software developer, that was sort of like the next step for me. And it sort of just rolled from there.
Wow, that's awesome. And I find that interesting that you said you were an athlete. So you said pedaling, I'm assuming you're cycling, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was cycling, and then later I took up running, and then now I've ditched them both because, well, not completely ditched them, but I wanted to, like, when I was in university, I had this thing in mind. So at the time I was super low income, didn't have much money at all. And I wanted to go overseas, like all of the people were doing at the time. Like, you go to university and then you do this overseas trip and you come back, and I couldn't feasibly afford that. And so I thought, well, maybe if I take a bike with me, if I can just afford the plane ticket, take a bike with me and then cycle around Europe, that would work. And so I became a cyclist because of that. So I started riding, and I eventually did it. 7 years later, I had 5 of my friends that I was in a band with, and we rode from Germany through Poland, through all of Eastern
Wow.
Europe, and then back to Germany. And that was a massive tick for me. Not
That
keto, but
That is awesome. Well, that's funny that you brought up the endurance portion of it because myself, that had been something that I had experienced in the past was bonking out, running out of energy. It feels horrible when it happens. It's like,
Mm.
I mean, anybody that's an athlete and has had that crash, I mean, they can tell you it sucks and you're like, you dread it, right? So then you're always like, oh, I might bonk. I better eat this banana or eat these gummies or do this thing. And from my own experience, I broke into the endurance scene after I had already become ketogenic. And
Ah,
that's when all of a sudden these crazy discoveries started happening. And I'm still diving into it. I was our mutual friend Frida texting her the other night. I was like, okay, what's going on here? I was training at this heart rate and it shouldn't have been a fat burning zone and my sugar should have gone up and getting all this crazy lingo going in. And I was like, but it didn't happen and I'm trying to figure out why. And like,
mm.
sometimes you can't totally hack your body. It's always a learning experience. That's what's so great about it. But I find that is also a piece of the puzzle for you as well.
Yeah, totally. And I a couple of years ago, I did a keto marathon, and I think I learned a lot from it. It's funny, like now John is trying to do his own version of, running whilst in a ketogenic state. And I just found that I was hitting a lot of roadblocks along the way. And admittedly, like I only had 16 weeks to train for the marathon. And I'd done half marathons before that, and there was a lot of things involved. But there's a book that's called Endurance by Mark Sisson and
Brad Kearns, he's one of
Brad
my
Cairns, yeah.
pals. He's awesome
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. And I read their book and I was like, holy moly, this is possible. And, just training at that maffetone heart rate was so beneficial. And it was something I'd never done. Like I was always just like out of the gate, fast as possible until we burn. and, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that was what cycling taught me. But coming to running, you can't really do that. And yeah, it's really interesting when you start to try and increase that maffetone pace. So same heart rate, but just try and increase that pace. That was super beneficial for me because everything else sort of just comes up to that level. And I know that John was trying to do that, and he's been having his own issues. And I think everyone just has their own issues when it comes to dealing with that type of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. When I tried the maffetone training, I'm an impatient person, and then I also mental relaxation for me is going a lot harder than that training allows.
Yeah.
Mentally, I feel really good if I'm overdoing it, which is a bad quality for many people. uh, but anyway, I needed to go back to it probably and revisit it, but it's on my bucket list to-do list. I'm still kind of charging too hard ahead, and then I'll probably learn the hard way like I always do and have to go back to something like that.
Yeah, I think that you need the benefit of both worlds. Like training at the maftone pace gets you really good at running slow, right? And so you need speed work in there. You need tempo stuff in there. It's just not possible to train all of your, do all of your training at that heart rate. But I do find that those longer endurance runs at that heart rate is important because otherwise you just build up too much stress, right? And I was getting injured, I was getting sick all the time, and just bringing it back down and doing those long runs at that pace. And then when you want to go faster, when you want to do tempos, like do them in specific blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And and take weeks off. Like there's this thing where like you build up an accumulation of stress and then you just have to recover. And so yeah, there's so many techniques out there. I found that the run less, run faster method helped me a lot when I was running.
Mm-hmm.
But then in combination with the maffetone heart rate. And if anyone wants to know any more about this, just Google it. There's lots of stuff out there that can help as well.
Absolutely. Well, we kind of dove down a rabbit hole on that one, but we both kind of been there and experienced it. And being a ketogenic athlete's super interesting. The other thing I've really learned is that my body has adapted so well to being ketogenic. If I do pull carbs in, I use them both, but then I stay in ketosis. And it's like a
Mm.
double fuel. It's like double whammy, and I perform amazingly on it. So that's been a fun thing for me when I'm like, oh, cool, I can do both and I perform well, and it's just like awesome bonus. So I love it all.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they come into endurance and they look at the ketogenic diet, they're really afraid of losing that top gear. And so I think once you've done it for a little while, you've been ketogenic and your body's really used to burning fat, then being metabolically flexible, where you can, use those two different systems, becomes so important, because you sometimes there is a requirement for carbohydrates. If you're maxing out, you can't burn anything other than glycogen at that point. And races don't really determine, like, you can't just say, oh, I'll just do maftone pace the entire time, but then someone overtakes you and you go, no, I've got to stick to this heart rate. Sorry, mate, can you slow down? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really work like that. So yeah, I definitely think there's a place for carbohydrates, especially in endurance training too.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I discovered, and man, I'm still learning, but holy cow, I opened up a Pandora's box when I started training ketogenic, because it's crazy. And like you said, metabolic flexibility, that's the key there. I don't think be dogmatic against anything. It all has its place. And I've been successful using both. More successful staying primarily ketogenic though for me.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think everyone's different, and that's the beneficial part. It's like, if you are listening to this podcast and you're thinking about going ketogenic, try it out, see if it works, give it some time to adapt, and then start thinking about, all right, what's next? Because it does take a little while to adapt to that phase or to that point. Probably not a good time to do the ketogenic diet like 6 weeks out before a marathon or something like that. So give it time, do it in the off season, and just like get a really good base endurance, and then think about whether you need to add carbs back or not. I think that's the best way to approach it as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the big mistakes that happens right now is people are like, oh, I tried that for a little time, but then it didn't work, or I didn't feel good, or I had no energy. So I decided that I was not going to, it didn't work for me. But it really does take time. You have spent your whole life. I mean, for the majority of us, we've spent our whole life burning carbohydrates. We've never, ever had to go to that place where our body has to switch over to fuel sources. It just doesn't have to. I mean, the sugar's there, the glycogen's there. It uses that for its fuel. It's the easiest, it's the fastest, and that's what it does. So primarily, none of us have to go there. And so we've spent our whole life honing in that skill with our body. And then all of a sudden, we say, we're going to try a ketogenic diet. We switch the light bulb, and we expect it to work in 2 weeks, even though we spent how many years doing it the other way. It's just like any skill or any kind of fitness. You have to learn how to do it, and that is metabolic flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that Rachel Gregory, she talks a lot about this too, where, having that metabolic flexibility gives you the best of both worlds. So you don't want to always be in one section or the other. And I do think that the ketogenic diet is an optimal place to be, because you don't have that roller coaster ride of emotions and energy levels and whatnot. And you can actually get through a race or a training ride or whatever without feeling so depleted. But yeah, I definitely think there is that optional additional extra if you want to go to that point. And I know Zach Bitter, he does a lot of this too, where he runs he runs mainly off of I believe I don't know exactly what he's doing right now, but he mainly is fat fuel, right? And then he just uses carbohydrates to break world records. Like the 12-hour, 12 hour, I think he holds the 12-hour record, and also
Yeah, and
the
he's doing one
100-mile
right
record.
now. I don't know what he's doing right now, but he's doing something crazy right now.
Yeah,
I
he's
think he's
nuts. Yeah,
started
great guy
yesterday,
too.
but yeah. Anyway, so one big part about people making dietary changes is it's overwhelming to get their meals cooked. Like, we're in a society where everything is such an instant gratification. You can like go to the drive-through, you can go to the store and you have a TV dinner, or you have a pizza, or things that are totally instant and available to you. And one thing that we've kind of gotten lazy about as a society is setting time aside to properly cook our meals. So when people go to make this dietary change, it can be extremely overwhelming and confusing to them. And that's where you're starting to change the perspective with people with your cooking and your coaching.
Yeah. And, I think that the ketogenic diet is something where it requires a little bit of a mind shift, because we always, like, as you were saying before, we've been burning carbs for our entire life. And so what does your plate look like when you suddenly switch to the ketogenic diet? And And that's where I've got a YouTube channel where I sort of just show people like, this is what a normal like ketogenic meal plan sort of looks like. And then this might look like, this is what it looks like when you want to lose weight, or this might be if you want to build muscle, or, there's different, I think people are very visual, especially when it comes to online. And so giving those options are so important, but it really doesn't have to be anything complicated. About a year ago, Frida really helped me out when I was trying to recomposition my body, because rewind like 2 or 3 years ago when I was doing the full marathon ketogenic, I went and had a DEXA scan, and I was 25% body fat. And as a male, that's pretty high and it's not good. And, I was at that point, even though that I'd done all this work in the ketogenic diet, I'd created all these recipes and I'd done all this, these meal plans and things, even I was not at the point where I was feeling confident in my own self. So Frida taught me a lot about tracking macros and taught me a lot about being consistent and being really, it's not always about being on a diet and being off a diet. There's that space in the middle where consistency matters so much more than perfection. And I think that's where a lot of people come to the ketogenic diet. They want to be perfect. They want to lose as much weight as possible, feasibly possible. And they do all of the things and then give up after 2 weeks because the ketogenic diet didn't work for me because I only lost 2 kilos or 4 pounds or whatever. And you go, well, it did. You just gave up too early, So this is where like making, and this is where like when people say, oh, the ketogenic diet becomes a lifestyle. And when I first started keto, I was like, it's not a lifestyle. This is a massive change, like I can no longer eat out at restaurants. I can't eat at drive-throughs. I can't go to a cafe and just order whatever I want. And realistically, it's probably not good to do that anyway. But how do you where's the middle ground in all of that? And that was where starting to track macros was super important. But for some people, they're at every sort of different level. There's some people who have lots of weight to lose, and just by cutting the carbohydrates out, that is the catalyst to become successful, to be able to get to their goal. And that's fantastic, but what happens when that stops working? Well, then you probably want to have a look at the other macronutrients too. So protein, really important. Fat, really important. Too much of all of those things, it just gives your body this positive energy balance where it's impossible to lose weight. So manipulating those in a strategic way can have some really powerful effects. And then you combine that with just movement, like just trying to get 10,000 steps, or doing some exercise, or getting out and getting some sun, or just like making sure you're getting enough vitamin D, or like ensuring that your body's got enough magnesium. They're all like little tweaks that you can make, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what you can sustain. And then how can you sustain that for the next 6 months, 12 months, not just the next 2 months, because that doesn't teach you anything. Putting that into practice for a year does. And I think Rebel Wilson, she recently went through a year of health. And it's so important to think about it as like a year of health. If you do have a lot of weight to lose, or even if you don't, I think changing the way that you think about food requires like a year's mentality worth of doing that. And how can you sustain that? How can you be accountable? How can you make sure you're doing the right things? That's where potentially a health coach can help, or someone who knows what they're talking about. But even being able to do that by yourself, just cutting the carbs or tracking macros or making sure that it's sustainable, meal prepping, those things, that's where I find a lot of clients have the most success.
Absolutely. I think I mean, you don't want to obviously fixate on too long-term of a goal, because sometimes that can make it kind of fizzle out and burn up, but making sure that you're setting attainable time-bound goals that you're understanding of is super important. And then goals that you can measure in some way, because if you just throw something out there, like I'm going to lose 20 pounds, that's not getting you anywhere. I mean, when are you going to lose the 20 pounds by? Are you going to lose it by your friend's wedding in the summertime, or are you going to lose it by 2075? Like, there's a big difference there with your goals. And so you kind of have to specify what your goals are, and it helps you reach them better, I think, when you have guidelines set for yourself.
Yeah, totally. And even what I do with my clients is just redefining success. So instead of focusing on the results, like losing 20 pounds, focus on the things that will get you there. So, for instance, I had a client earlier today where they were focusing on getting back to, like they did so well for 8 to 9 weeks. Then they had a job change, and that job change just sent them out of control. It was just a bit of a spiral. Then Thanksgiving came around. It was just like, whew, lots of stress, right? And then trying to get back on the bandwagon, so to speak, was really hard because their level of success was high, right? And so if you focus on trying to lose 20 pounds, it's sort of like driving along the highway, and you sort of glance at the speedo, you glance at the rear vision mirror, you glance at either side, you make sure that there's no cars in front of you, you make sure you're taking the right the right exit signs. And focusing on 20 pounds is literally like looking at the speedo and saying, why am I not going any faster? And it could be because there's a car in front of you, or you just missed the exit, or you're going in the wrong direction now. So start focusing on the things that you can control, which is different for everyone, but maybe that's just meal prepping one day for this week. Maybe that's walking out to the letterbox. I know it's super cold over there at the moment. Walking out to the letterbox, you literally have to put all of your stuff on so you can go to the letterbox and come back inside. But generally what happens is that those small habits, or that small change, if you make that consistently over time, instead of walking to the letterbox, let's walk to the street across the road, and then let's walk around the block. And then let's walk down the road to the shops. And maybe you want to do your grocery shopping walking. And making those changes is so much more important than trying to focus on the weight loss or the time frame, and because they're important, they're totally important, and tracking those measurements. And I like to reverse engineer goals sometimes as well. But if you're focusing on that so much that you forget about what the actions are to do it, then sometimes it just leads to disappointment. So that's what I've been focusing on a lot, especially coming into the holiday season. If you can focus on the things you can control, and your weight will do whatever it wants to do. That's like, and same with performance, like if you're doing the training and you're not getting those results, then, there might be something wrong in the training. I don't know, but it's just doing those small tweaks and being able to go, okay, that actually made a difference because I measured it. And so that's where I can start doing more of that. Or I don't know, but do you sort of experience that with the people you work with as well?
Absolutely. Like, I think people like, I am kind of in this spot where it's hard for me to want to have like clients send me their weight, for example, because I want to use it as a metric in order to see if I need to dial things in a different way. But I also don't want them to be getting stressed about the number on the scale, thinking that I expect it to go down or something like that. So I have to heavily disclaim that with my clients. I mean, I just talked to somebody tonight and I was like, listen, we're going to weigh ourselves every once in a while. Please don't get frustrated if you don't see the scale change, I said, and don't think that I'm expecting it to happen or that you let someone down or even yourself down because it didn't change. I said, what we needed to know is that is just a tool that we're going to use as a metric to maybe see if something needs to be tweaked later on. And I mean, I'm doing contest prep for bodybuilders as well, so I have to be very meticulous with that. And I mean, here's a prime metric: is before Thanksgiving I had one of my gals weigh herself, and then after Thanksgiving she weighed herself again, and she actually lost weight. That's because her metabolism is fired up. And that's a great thing for me to know, because as I get closer to show, I'm going to know that I may be able to switch things up like that and get results and stop her from getting in any ruts, basically, any plateaus. So there's a lot of information that I can get from that, even if it's just somebody gaining weight and getting some water retention or who knows, So, I mean, it can be a metric, but I'm always afraid to put it in my clients' plans because I don't want it to be a metric that stresses them out.
Totally. And I think the best thing that Frida did with me was to just measure your weight every single day, because you become detached to what the number says on the scale, and you just start focusing on the average. And where's that average going? Is that average going down? Awesome. If it's not, let's change something, because it's not always all about weight. And I guess that like when you're working with bodybuilders and people who are like physique, meticulous with that sort of stuff, that can also have some negative consequences too. But yeah, I mean, like if you're focusing on weight loss, that's the wrong metric to focus on. You want to focus on the things that will cause the weight loss. And like those refeed days when they come back, when there's less weight the next day, you go, see, like most of my clients, I always say, like, I've never eaten this much food in my entire life. And I don't know how I'm losing weight, but thank you.
Absolutely. And that's a really great thing, right? And not all of I don't put all my clients on a ketogenic diet. It really is highly individual based on their needs and stuff. And this one particular client, we do a lot of carb cycling with her, and it works really great. And so I'm not going to change a good thing, for sure. But, yeah. And then there's others that just don't do well on certain things, and you just have to change it. And, yeah, I mean, and then the other thing is, and like you were saying on that, I try to keep all my people's food extremely high, because I think we're in a society, especially in the bodybuilding industry, where people are being starved, and it's giving them major metabolic ramifications down the road. And I have my own clients coming to me saying, hey, well, my friend is prepping for a show with this team, and she's only eating like 1,300 calories, and we're 20 weeks out, and she's doing cardio every day. Or they'll come to me and they're like, I did cardio because my friend on this team is doing cardio, and I was getting kind of worried, so I thought I should start doing cardio. And I'm like, no, not right now. We don't need to. It's not necessary. Why stress your body out more than it needs to be? And so, I'm in the more subtle approach of let's get you there with the least amount possible. Let's not throw the whole wad at it right away.
Yeah, it's so true, and I think that's what Frida did with me. Like, we did carb cycling, and that worked really well for me, because I was having a hard time kicking the carbs. Like, at that point where you've been keto for so long, it just sort of like you get the carb creep, and they creep back in, and then actually tracking it, you go, holy moly, like there's a lot that's sort of creeping in there. And even reverse dieting, that was not a concept that I had in my, it was not something that I'd ever thought about until I'd read, Eric Helms has got the, this guy.
Yep.
The muscle and strength pyramid, and also the nutrition one. They sort of talk about this like pyramid of things that actually make a difference when you're trying to either do contest prep, or you're trying to lose weight, or you're trying to get to certain things. Focus on those and stop focusing on what everyone else is doing. Because and there's so many things in life that applies to, whether that's in business or whether that's running a podcast, or like, oh, look at all these other people doing these other podcasts, and maybe I should do that in mine. It's like, hey, if you're doing the right thing and it's working for you, awesome. And that, like, when you stop focusing on what everyone else is doing, and especially in business, if you have your own strategy and you're executing on that, then you just be better than you were yesterday. And then that's success. Like, stop caring what everyone else does, and that's the best way to do it, I find.
Right. Well, that's pretty great, and I think we definitely rabbit holed on that one, but it is what it is. It's part of things. So let's talk about setting up a ketogenic kitchen, because that's a great place to start. If one decided tomorrow that they wanted to start a ketogenic diet, what is the very first thing that you recommend that they do?
Put all the carbs in a cardboard box and put that box in somewhere else.
Donate it to the food bank. That's what I did with all my stuff. We started a GAPS diet in 2015, and I walked in the house after going to the seminar, and I cleaned out my whole house. I got rid of everything.
Yeah. And, some people are in the position where they want to do the ketogenic diet themselves, and their partner or their family isn't. And so I find that putting all of the stuff in a box, or giving it away, or whatever that is, you don't have to make that micro decision every time you open the cupboard, or every time you open the fridge, that should I have that or should I not? And if you stop making those micro decisions, it detaches the primal section of your brain that has got so confused that you need carbs just as much as you need water to survive. When that stops happening, then you can sort of start thinking, okay, what are some foods I can replace that with that are really healthy? So I find, like, focusing on protein. So getting some type of really healthy protein, whether that's beef, chicken, pork, poultry, whatever, like seafood, it's that's really up to what you prefer. And then pairing that with some type of green leafy vegetable, pairing that with any type of vegetables, really. Like if you're just trying to ease into the ketogenic diet, then slowly tapering those carbs down is going to work wonders for some people. And then some people just need to go cold turkey. So doing that in a particular way, and then, stocking the pantry and the fridge with other things that you might find helpful. So I know that the ketogenic diet revolves a lot around butter and bacon, and it doesn't need to always, but sometimes having some bacon and eggs in the fridge so you can just quickly make that for breakfast, that's easy. Or whether you're trying to meal prep, I often find that meal prepping for weight loss, you can sort of take a pound of ground beef, or 500 grams in Australia, and split that up over the 4 meals, and then add heaps of veggies and heaps of like healthy fats to that. That's perfect, and I think there's lots of herbs and spices you can make things really awesome with, or taste really nice. There's a book that I always recommend. It's called The Flavor Bible. So if you're ever stuck on like, I can't cook, I don't know what flavors go together. Like I was recently watching MasterChef at earlier this year, and I was just wondering, like, how on earth do they come up with all these flavors and the combinations, and like how to just put a whole bunch of random pantry ingredients into an awesome meal. And that comes through flavor pairing. So if you get the Flavor Bible, you can get it on Amazon. Just look, it comes like per ingredient. So if you've got heaps of ground beef, for instance, you might know that garlic and red wine and mushrooms go really well with that. Or there's just, there's like lots of pairings that you can focus on, and stop worrying about all of the things that you're missing out on, because there's so much that you can eat on the ketogenic diet that all of the stuff you can't really doesn't matter.
I have found the same thing. I mean, you hear a lot of people that kind of bash on it and say that, oh, well, it's too restrictive, but really it's not. And then in this society, depending on what route you try to go, I try to keep it pretty clean keto most of the time. Depending on what route you go, there's a whole lot of other stuff that you can make work if you do need to get yourself into that situation where you're like, I just need ice cream, or I just need this, or I just need that. Like there are compromises out there, so many of them, and especially with cooking. I mean, there are the cognac flour noodles now that are miracle noodles or whatever. And I mean, sometimes I just get myself a big thing of basil pesto and some sausage or chicken, and I throw that in some of those noodles and mix it up, and it is good. Like there was nothing wrong with it. So there's so many options. And I know on my own website, I made this, I wanted to have a really deep flavor of something. And I was looking for something in particular, but I couldn't quite find it. And I started going crazy. I'm sure you do too, where I put some lemon in some cauliflower rice, and then I put some dill in there, and then I put some garlic in there, and then some salt. And I was like, holy cow, lemon and dill and salt and garlic is really, really good on cauliflower rice. Then let's add a big pound of butter on the top of that. And let me tell you, it was good. And I was not missing rice at all when I ate it. And I think that's where the discovery starts to come in, is when you start removing these processed foods, you start actually tasting the flavor of actual food, and it tastes so much better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's probably people listening to this podcast going, I hate cauliflower rice. How can you ever say that about cauliflower rice? And sometimes it's just really good. There's no good way to spin it. Like there is just going to be some compromises to doing the ketogenic diet. But I think to reframe is to, instead of thinking about restriction, you want to think about restraint. And when we're coming into the holiday season, it's not all about saying, no, I can't eat that. I can't eat that. I can't eat that. It's like, you can just have a normal amount and then go back to your ketogenic diet or the way you were doing it before that. It's not something where you have to go crazy with. And some people do really well with going cold turkey, and some people need to still have a little bit in their life and just have some, restraint in that respect. And it sort of depends on whether you are someone who really loves a plan, or if you want to learn the rules and then break them. There's lots of different personalities that sort of come into this. And that's what I work with a lot of my clients do, is like, how do you operate best? How can you use the rules that you know, or the way that the framework that you use to best apply this to your life. Yeah. And so I think that's so important too, is like making the stuff that you love, making healthy alternatives to that. So if you were someone who was having lots of fried rice, then maybe cauliflower might be a great substitute, but you're probably going to still miss the fact that you're not eating rice because it's like not rice. So just eat something different instead. Like just have an awesome steak and you're like, oh, I don't miss fried rice because steak's better than fried rice. So yeah, there's lots of different options out there and it depends on the person too.
Absolutely. And then what I also have found is in that particular camp is not buying pre-packaged cauliflower rice that goes in the microwave or wherever. It only takes seconds to make it at home and it's easy to make and it tastes so much better. So don't make the mistake of getting sucked into the pre-packaged cauliflower rice field. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it tastes like cardboard. Yeah.
And soggy yuck. But anyway, so what are some healthy meals people can cook that are relatively straightforward and easy if they're looking to branch into the ketogenic diet?
Yeah, so the one I always recommend is one that some people call crackslaw, some people call sesame beef coleslaw, some people give all types of crazy names to it, but it's basically ground beef and dry cabbage. So you can buy pre-packaged bags of like different types of cabbage, or you can even just buy a green cabbage and just slice it up. You put those two together and you add some garlic, you add some sesame seed oil, you add some soy sauce if you want to, or tamari sauce or coconut aminos or wherever your camp is. And then you add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, some sesame seeds over the top and it's done. And so you can either meal prep that, it's freezer friendly. That's a great way to start and it's super easy. You literally cannot go wrong. There's literally no way you can do that unless you have a hard time cooking meat. Then maybe, but it's like with that recipe, it's very easy. That's probably the first step I would get someone to do.
That is a good one. I like that. What's some other ones that people can try on for size? Because that was a good one you just pulled out right there.
Yeah. So I find that there's lots of healthy main meals. There's like, if you pretty much focus on protein and getting some vegetables in there and adding some healthy fat, that's a good like principle to have. And there's what I like to think of is like, if you have a plate, then you have 50% of that plate is vegetables, 25% of that plate is some type of protein, and then maybe 25% is some type of fat. And just use that as a bit of a reference. That's for main meals. But when it comes to things like desserts or breads or stuff that you might have previously eaten and you want to still incorporate that in the ketogenic diet, then I've got heaps of dessert recipes on my website. But there's one that I find particularly helpful. And I know that lots of people have been talking about this online, and it's basically what I call sugar-free jelly. And it's some type of electrolytes. So on the ketogenic diet, electrolytes super important to maintain hydration, to pull the water into your cells. And drinking water is also fantastic too. But this sugar-free jelly, basically you can buy gelatin powder, and gelatin powder you can find at the grocery store. It's super cheap, really easy to get. You can also there's one that's called Great Lakes, which is more expensive and probably better quality, but it's not necessary. You take electrolytes and a tablespoon of gelatin powder, and you put that in 2 cups of water. So 1 cup is hot water, so you dissolve the gelatin powder, and then the next one is cold. You put that in a glass container or in some container, you put it in the fridge overnight, and then you have 2 cups worth of jelly or jello essentially. And it's super filling, it's super delicious. You're getting the electrolytes in, you're getting the glycine from the gelatin in there. So you're actually helping repair your gut lining. Lots and lots of benefits of having that hydrolyzed collagen in your diet. And it just works. And I do that with all my clients as well.
I love that. I'm stealing that idea from you actually for my clients, because that's a good one. And I know I've gotten crazy with my kids and stuff to keep them eating healthy snacks that aren't super processed. You can get wonderful little jelly mold, candy molds, things like that. And I've made like bone broth protein, gummy bears, and all sorts of crazy things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And bone broth is really, really good because it probably already contains some of that collagen anyway, which is fantastic. If you are going to go down the electrolyte route, get something that's like stevia sweetened or monk fruit sweetened. The ones that have the artificial sweeteners are probably just like not doing so well for your gut health. So Ultima is a great one to use. I
like
know
Ultima.
that the cherry and the watermelon and the grape, they're awesome flavors. They tend to be expensive in Australia just because they do come from the US, I believe. And so they sort of take a little while, but they're awesome. Like any type of electrolytes is going to help with your electrolyte balance. So your minerals are there, but also keep some glycine in there. It's just a fantastic way to finish the night as well. If you're one of those people who like gets the munchies at night time, or you find that you're craving sweets or you just need something else to fill you up, then that's a great way to do it as well.
I love that. I love that. That's a great hack. I'm stealing it.
Yeah.
So what's another, I mean, that's the common thing, right? Is the sweet tooth. Many people get a sweet tooth. And I mean, a keto dessert is still a dessert. So I try to make that pretty clear with my clients, but sometimes if you're really hankering, I think coming up with a great keto alternative is a wonderful thing. Or say you're going to Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving or going to somebody's house or who knows what. Any of those things, there are great compromises. And that's the wonderful thing about this particular nutritional approach is there's so, I mean, you are full of desserts. There's so many things out there. So what's another simple, easy thing that people can make that is a dessert? Maybe something quick.
Yeah. Okay. So there's probably two sort of camps there, I guess. Like cheesecake is always going to impress all the people who are not keto. So generally like a New York baked cheesecake or something along those lines, whilst they do take a little bit of time, they are delicious and they don't need to be that sweet. So that's something where you don't have to add that much of the keto friendly sweetener to it, because people generally turn their nose up if it's like very minty or very bitter or very like just very different to sugar. So that's a great option there. You can do no bake cheesecakes and they work really well too. I've again using the gelatin to sort of set the cheesecake in the filling. That's a great way. But if you are someone who just wants something like really quick and simple and sort of maybe down the realm of the electrolyte stuff, but you don't have 12 hours to wait until it's ready. I've just been mixing Greek yogurt with some protein powder. And if you want, put some heavy cream in there, some nuts, you can put berries in there if you want. That's a really quick, easy option. It's like a riff on a parfait, and you can do whatever you want with those. So there's two camps there. Like you can do the pre-prepared dessert thing, like cheesecakes, even tiramisu, chocolate chip cookies. They're all like massive fan favorites. Or you can go down the route of like, just mixing something up in a bowl and just eating that, and it's awesome.
I'm with you on that. I do that frequently. Or my daughter, she's addicted to mug cakes. That's like her get out of school snack. But I'm like, okay, well, I would much rather have her eating that than some kind of Doritos or Little Debbie snacks or something like that. So I love it. But let's talk about breakfasts. I know obviously that the people think, and this is the crazy thing, my husband sat down at work the other day and he was blown away because one of the guys at the table was eating oatmeal. And my husband goes, "Where's your normal breakfast?" Because the guy normally has like bacon and eggs and stuff. And he goes, "Well, I'm trying to get healthy, so I decided to start eating oatmeal." And so people are so afraid of eating bacon. What do you have to say about that?
So there has been a lot of I guess there's been a lot of negative press around the fact that bacon contains nitrates and that nitrates aren't good for you, or a lot of saturated fat isn't good for you. And I think that if you are someone who doesn't feel that like saturated fat works very well for you, then you probably have an aversion to bacon. And that could potentially be a genetic thing. So there's these genetic mutations called the ApoE genes, which you can be ApoE2, ApoE3, ApoE4. Generally, ApoE4 people, or have people who have that genetic disposition, they don't work very well with saturated fat. And so something more down the realm of a Mediterranean diet might be more suitable. But with bacon, and that bacon is bad and all that type of stuff, read the big fat surprise, I think, by Nina Teicholz, and it sort of dispels the whole like 7-country study that made, you know, saturated fat demonized, and specifically lots of the protein, the animal proteins that contained a lot of saturated fat. But in reality, I think that eating bacon every day probably isn't the best thing anyway. It's good to sort of mix it up, and people get so sick of like eggs and bacon, eggs and bacon, eggs and bacon, eggs and bacon every single morning for breakfast. It's great, don't get me wrong, to have it heaps, but there's lots of other alternatives, so like making keto granola, or even making chia seed pudding, or making just even fasting. Like breakfast doesn't have to be a thing, right? Oatmeal has its place for those people, but I just find that the blood sugar elevation you get and the crash on the other side just leaves you wanting more food at 10 o'clock in the morning, and even before lunchtime. And so with those massive blood sugar spikes and the insulin that's responsible for bringing it back down, it's probably not good long-term for your health. Whereas eating bacon and eggs, or eating avocado with that, or even just having eggs and avocado, or like, bacon's not the enemy here. It's the fact that we're eating all the crap outside of what's going on in our normal diet. And that's where the problem is. And so, yeah, I mean, nitrates, I don't have enough research myself to be able to tell you whether they're good or bad or not, but I know Dr. Ken Berry, he talks a lot about those, and he has some very good advice when it comes to that. I'm not a doctor, I can't give medical advice, but do what works for you. I think that's the main thing there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from his camp of things, he said he would rather see people eating that than most of the stuff that they're eating. And,
Yeah.
you know, he said, honestly, most people are suffering from so much crazy insulin spikes and things like that, that if they go to a lunch meat or bacon or something, they're doing themselves a huge favor compared to what they've been experiencing. But yeah, so what would you said, obviously fasting, that's a great thing, right? And I notice naturally the longer I'm in ketosis and the more ketones I have going, the less I want to eat, which can be kind of problematic at some points when I actually should probably be eating. So I mean, on the weekends, it's really bad. I eat during the week because the stretches between eating are pretty long, and I try to eat enough to sustain the kind of power I'm putting out with my athletics and stuff. So I have to make myself eat. But during the weekends, I stay fasted usually till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then that's when I eat like a horse until like 6 o'clock, and then I'll do it again. So that's a great thing, the fasting, for sure. How about easy keto things? Because some people are on the go all the time, and it's hard for them to like heat a meal up or prepare a meal. Are there some kind of easier snacks that you could suggest?
Yeah. So macadamia nuts are like the perfect ratio of ketogenic profile. They're mostly fat, they're a little bit of protein and some carbs. However, macadamias are expensive. So you can also walk into your grocery store and just buy an avocado and just eat that. Your workplace has probably got some salt and pepper that you can borrow and give back later on. There's lots of different options. Even buying a rotisserie chicken and putting that with a whole bunch of like a prepackaged salad, or like when it comes to easy, I tend not to recommend stuff that comes in packets, just because, and what I'm saying there is like pre-made egg baked bacon things that have lots of preservatives in them, because there's a whole other realm where you can go down where your toxic load is really important when it comes to maintaining a good health. And so I think if you're eating a lot of processed foods, then your toxic load just ends up being quite high. So try and avoid the packaged stuff wherever possible, but I think sometimes it's not. And so opting for whatever's easiest is always best. And here in Australia, we really don't have that much like packaged keto stuff yet, which is really good, I think, because it tends to just sort of lead to lazy habits. And like what we were talking about at the start of the podcast, it's still good to have whole foods in your diet, or learning how to cook, or, you know, putting in those little basic principles, because that will ultimately get you to your goal. The ease and the use and stuff you can use as a bit of a tool to get you through. For instance, if you're traveling a lot, like I know that there's lots of companies who do really good brands of jerky, or even just putting fat in your coffee. Like they're really good ways to get you through. But as a holistic sort of nutritional perspective, I would prefer you go and get some macadamias and an avocado and some lettuce and a chicken and some like sliced meats from the deli or whatnot. Like those things are always going to be a little bit better for you than just a keto bar, if that makes sense.
And probably far better than the alternative, which is like McDonald's or
Exactly.
hitting
Yeah.
some fast food joint of some kind or grabbing some kind of TV dinner. So also hard boiled eggs. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that too. And I think sometimes that's a really good way to prep it. But if you're in the shops and
Yeah.
but in Australia, they don't really sell hard boiled eggs. But I know in Japan they do. That we went to Japan a couple of years ago, and also in Korea. They at just the grocery store, they just sell like single hard boiled eggs. And it's the best thing ever because you can just go in and get a few and then leave, and you're like, buy all the carbs. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about sauces and dressings. A lot of people, because that's another thing we kind of have to watch. I don't know what side of the street you sit on this, but there are a lot of nasty processed oils that you shouldn't be taking in as part of your fat consumption when you're on a ketogenic diet. Some people don't take them into consideration, and if that works for them for the beginning of their journey or whatever, that's fine. But over time, they can be a burden to our body. And so many dressings and stuff don't have carbs in them, but they have a lot of other bad things in them. So I'm one where I like to kind of make my own sauces and dressings and things. Are there any kinds that you make that you would recommend to people, or things that they could make swaps with that are better instead of eating some of those other dressings?
Yeah. So generally, like when I find that lots of sauces and lots of things, they're awesome, and they definitely come in prepackaged forms, and sometimes they don't have carbs. And you look at the back and you look at the net carbs, and you're like, sweet, I can have heaps of this. But you look at the ingredients, and the first one's canola oil, and you go, actually. And I'm talking about mayonnaise here. So mayonnaise is one of those ones where it just gets loaded with heaps and heaps of bad oils, and they become they're just not good for you long term. So trying to avoid those by making your own is always the best way to go, and it's really easy. You just get a glass jar, and you get one of those immersion blenders, and you put 1 egg yolk and a little bit of Dijon mustard in the bottom, and you put half a cup of olive oil in there, so you can just get good quality olive oil, and then you blend that, and it becomes mayonnaise. It's really not that hard to make. You add a little bit of lemon juice, and it turns that white color, and so it looks like store-bought mayonnaise. And if you put it in the mayonnaise container, your kids probably won't even know either. And so
It's delicious too. That's the other
yeah,
crazy thing, is that I actually recently had one of my clients start making her own. I've been making mine out of duck fat, which is so
yeah.
good. But she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so much better than the stuff at the store. I don't know why I ever liked that."
Yeah. And also, like, if you are at the store and you don't have an immersion blender and you're not really keen on like making your own sauces, mustards are always a pretty good option, because generally it's like vinegar and mustard seed, and they're super low in carbs. Like whether that's any type of mustard, even in Australia, you can get plenty of like seeded mustards and hot English mustards and those things, or even going down the route of hot sauces. Like I know Frank's do a hot sauce, which is pretty low carb and generally okay. Like some people use it every single day on every single ingredient for every single mouthful. And then you go, well, you're probably zinc deficient, so
Yeah.
we might look at that first. But yeah, I think that there's plenty of sauces out there that are really healthy. And if all else fails, just use butter. That's my go-to as well.
I love that. Butter pretty much goes on everything that I
Yeah.
eat, but salsa, that's another good one. I really like
Yeah.
salsa. And tomatoes do have some carbs in them, but you don't have to use a ton of them, and they add a more depth of flavor to things.
Yeah, that's a good one too. And there's lots of, like, I refer to the flavor Bible all the time, because most of the time you don't need to add sauces on top of things. If you can pair the flavors together properly, that in itself becomes the flavor of the dish. So yeah, there's different ways of doing it. I don't think any way is right or wrong,
Mhm.
but find what works for you. And if you can make it work long term, that's great.
I love it. Well, Aaron, it has been awesome. We've had a good time, I think, chatting about all sorts of things across the ketogenic board here. So, if my listeners want to go and find you, how do they do that?
Yeah, cool. So, by the accent, I'm from Australia. So anything on the website is always .com.au. So Fat for Weight Loss is my website. So Fat for Weight Loss, all spelled out, .com.au. That's my website. I've got a YouTube channel. If you just type in Fat for Weight Loss, it'll come up. Instagram, Facebook, whatever medium is best for you. I'm not on TikTok yet, and no, I'm not sure if I ever will be, but that's a whole nother route. And if you're big into TikTok, you're probably not big into like watching recipes. You're probably more interested in watching silly videos. So, but I think there's a time and a place for all types of social medias. So whichever one you're on, I'm probably on there. Just type in Fat for Weight Loss and you'll be able to find me super easily. And YouTube's a great one as well for meal plans if you're looking for that sort of stuff. But if you're just looking for recipes, then the website's great too.
I love it. And how about your books? What are the name of them? Where are they available?
Yeah, so I've got the Keto Sweet Tooth Cookbook, which is available on Amazon. I think it's available in Barnes and Noble. It's in Sam's Book Club. I don't think it's in Costco or any of those massive stores, but it's in all the regular bookstores, right? There's also Easy Keto Meal Prep, which is that one's really, really good if you just want to follow the ketogenic diet for maybe weight loss purposes, or if you're trying to just not focus so much on the sweet tooth stuff. And then I have a new cookbook coming out at the start of next month that's called the Healthy Keto Air Fryer Cookbook. So if you've got an air fryer, not sure what to do with it, that's a good cookbook to get as well. And they're available all in the same. And I think also Whole Foods might be getting that book into their stores too. So if you're in Whole Foods, then check out the Healthy Keto Air Fryer Cookbook. It'll be there hopefully at the start of next year.
I'm getting it. I'm telling you that already. Like you probably saw my face light up, but I'm like the air fryer queen. I love the air fryer. It's the best thing ever. I break my stuff. Like I get these amazing kitchen appliances and I literally break them and have to get new ones because I use them so much. So I'm on top of that one, like big time. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So
Air
I hope
fryers are
everybody
awesome.
is as excited as I am about that.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, it's been a pleasure. I will put all your information in the show notes so that people can go click on those links and find them and find you and order your books and stuff because that's great. And it's a great place for them to get started in their keto journey.
Yeah. And look, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if anyone is still listening from all of our ramblings, thank you for listening as well. We really appreciate it.
I am so happy that you joined me today, Aaron.